Good evening, Purple family. Welcome to another episode of Shades of Purple, a Prince podcast. I am your host, Veronica Crutchfield. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Prince's early life and his debut album, For You, which came out on April 7th, 1978. So just a few months shy of Prince's 20th birthday. We're also going to be discussing the 27 instruments that he allegedly played on his debut album, For You. So let's get right into it. Prince Rogers Nelson was born on June 7th, 1958 at 6:17 p.m. at Mount Sinai Hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His parents, John Lewis Nelson and Mattie Della Shaw, were both from Louisiana. Now, John Nelson, his father, was actually born in Louisiana, and his mother, Mattie, was actually born in Minneapolis, her and her twin sister. However, her parents were also from Louisiana. So that means that Prince has Louisiana roots. So John Lewis, he was, like I said, he was born in Louisiana, and he moved to Minneapolis in 1948 to start his career as a musician. And he got married to his first wife named Vivian, and they had 4 kids: John R. Nelson, Lorna, Noreen, and Sharon. He formed his own jazz band called the Prince Rogers Trio, and that's where Prince got his name from. His father, John, named Prince after his jazz band, so I thought that was pretty neat. John met Mattie, Prince's mother, in 1956, and she was a singer with the group for a little while, but for not for very long. Like I said, her and her twin sister, Edna Mae, were born in Minneapolis, and their parents were from Louisiana, and they moved up there sometime, I believe, in the early 50s, more than likely. John worked by day at the Honeywell plant, and many of you probably recognize Honeywell because they do appliances like thermostats, I think stoves at one point. I know I've seen mostly Honeywell, I've seen like thermostats, but I don't know if Honeywell is even still around. But anyway, John worked there during the daytime, and at night he would go play with his jazz band, and sometimes they would play in clubs, and other times, they would also play in like strip clubs and things like that. So Prince got introduced very early on in his growing up to music, with both of his parents being musicians. So on August 31st, 1957, John and Mattie got married. Now, I said that John Lewis had 4 children with his first wife. And Mattie also had a son. His name was Alfred. So altogether, they had 5 children. Okay, and this is before Prince was born. Okay, so they were married. They were married August 31st, 1957, and then of course Prince was born June 7th of the following year, and then 2 years after that, Prince's sister, I think I can't ever remember if it's pronounced Tika or Tika. I think it's Tika. Tika was born in 1960. So Tika is the only like full-blooded sibling that Prince has. All the rest of his siblings, as we know, are half siblings. So going on, Prince started playing the piano at the age of 6, and he wrote his very first song, Funk Machine, when he was 7 years old on the piano. He would also play the tune from the Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was, I guess, I think it was a spy show. And then he would also play the theme of Batman, which, of course, that's like coming full circle because, of course, we know he would become involved with the Batman movie later on in his career when he became an adult. So he would play the theme from Batman on the piano. That was one of the first things he learned. And he talked about this when he did his very last tour, the piano and microphone phone, Lord, phone tour. He talked about, all the things that he would play on the piano. So the piano was the very first instrument that he played. Prince's parents would divorce in 1968 when he was just 10 years old. And his mother remarried a man named Hayward Baker, and she had another son with him named Omar. Prince also had yet another half sibling on his dad's side, a brother named Dwayne Nelson. Now, when I was doing research on this, I wasn't exactly sure um, exactly what was going on with Dwayne because, and the reason why I say that is because Dwayne was born in 1958, the same year as Prince, but on the internet, his mother is listed as Vivian Nelson, which was John Nelson's first wife. So either John cheated on Maddie and had another child with his ex-wife, or Vivian got remarried, and or maybe she didn't get remarried. She maybe had Dwayne with a another gentleman, and John Lewis has decided that he would claim Dwayne. So there's some kind of murkiness with Dwayne's paternity, but which is interesting though because Prince always treated Dwayne as if that was his brother. Dwayne would go on to work for Prince as his bodyguard for many many years before he passed, just a few years before Prince. So they were very close. They also played on the basketball team together in high school, I believe, and in junior high. They played on the basketball team together. So they were pretty close. And actually, Dwayne was the brother that Prince was talking about in the song Lady Cab Driver, where he's giving it to the lady cab driver, and he said, "This is for why I can't be like my brother, handsome and tall." So he was actually talking about Dwayne. So that's an interesting fact there for you. So, okay, so going back to Prince's early life. So, he did not get along very well with his stepfather, Hayward Baker. So, at some point, he moved back in with his father. But that didn't last too long because he got kicked out, supposedly, because there was a girl in his room. And the way that Morris Day tells it, he was actually there when this supposedly happened. Um, so Morris and I'm getting this information from Once Upon a Time in Minneapolis, which is a YouTube series. I put the first episode of that on the Facebook page. So this is where I'm getting the story from. So Morris Day says, and this is now Morris Day met Prince in middle school. Okay, I can't remember the name of the middle school they went to. Um, so him and Prince would bring girls back to Prince's dad's house. And he even said that Prince would take the mattress off the bed upstairs so that a way you wouldn't hear any like squeaking or anything, or the headboard or anything like that. And so apparently, on an occasion such as this, John came home early. I guess he maybe was taking a break from work. I don't know what the case was. Morrison really explained that part. But he said that John looked at Prince and said, "Put your key on the, I guess like the little dresser or whatever." And so Prince pretty much knew that he was kicked out because he had girls over, and John had probably told him, like, "Look, don't have anybody in my house while I'm gone." And Prince disobeyed that, and so Prince had to go. And so that happened at the age of 12. His father kicked him out for having a girl in his room. And so at some point after that, he stayed with his aunt for a little while, his father's sister. And so he was just kind of going from pillar to post, just kind of staying where he could until he finally ended up in his best friend's house, Andre Anderson, also known as Andre Simone. He ended up staying with them. Bernadette Anderson, which was Andre's mother, kind of took Prince in, and he was like another, kid living there. She already had 5 or 6 kids already. So that was kind of very, very generous of her to, I think, to allow Prince to stay there. So while they were staying together, of course, Andre was also musically inclined. He played the bass, and I think he also played a little keyboard as well. And so by this time, now we're up to high school. So Prince is now playing guitar. He's playing piano. He's also playing keyboard and bass as well. So I don't know if he's playing drums yet, but I believe so. I think that he's kind of playing a little bit of everything at this point. And also at this point, they have formed a band. And they eventually settled on the name Grand Central. But before that, it was a couple of names. It was Phoenix. It was Soul Explosion. And I think even at one point, because before Morris Day came on as their drummer, they had Jazz Charles Smith, who was Prince's cousin. And he had named the group Chaz, Cousin, and Friend. So he said, Chaz was him, and then Cousin was Prince, and then Friend was Andre. And Andre said he definitely did not like that name, and he said that Chaz had it bad of changing the name of the band and not telling them, and they would go to compete. And this one time, they announced the winner because they would have these Battle of the Bands competitions that they would go to. They would, have, little concerts, sometimes at the schools or at the YMCA, things like that. There was another band called Fly Time that Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis were a part of. And of course, we know later on, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Morris Day would become members of the Time. But before that time, they were also in kind of a rival band with Prince and his band. And so Andre tells his story where, they announced the winner of the I guess the competition. I can't talk. The competition. And they're like, okay, and the winner is Soul Explosion. And so they're like thinking, oh my God, we lost. And then Chaz was like, no, I changed the name to Soul Explosion. We won. So it would be just, so the band was a little disorganized to say the least. And that was even so after Morris Day. So Chaz, he had some commitments with football. He played football and he wasn't really able to make the rehearsals. So they decided to kind of let Chaz go do his thing and, go be this football star. And they end up getting Morris on as the drummer. And Linda, who was Andre Simone's sister, was the keyboard player. So that was pretty much the band. And also they had Terrence Jackson. He did percussion and congas and stuff like that. So they had a really nice put together band. And they started writing their own songs. And they finally ended up recording some demos, going to some local recording studios. They were able to do that because of a guy named Pepe Willie, who was a husband of Prince's cousin named Chantel. I can't remember what her last name was. So he kind of took the band under his wing and even allowed them to rehearse in his basement because at one point the band got their equipment stolen. And so Pepe allowed the band to play in his basement because they were also playing in the basement of Andre Simone's house. But they just kind of, wanted to move around because that was also Prince's bedroom. And the reason why it was his bedroom is because at one point he was staying upstairs with Andre in his room. But apparently they had different styles of living. Prince was a little bit more neater than Andre, according to Andre. And so, finally they just could not, live in the same bedroom anymore. So Prince decided to move into the basement. And that is where they also would rehearse the band. But anyway, after they stopped doing that, they got with Pepe Willie and they started rehearsing there. So, okay, so now we're up to the band going into the studio, cutting demos. One of the studios they went to was a studio called Moon Sound Studios, which was owned by a guy named Chris Moon. Now, Chris Moon is kind of the big, he was one of these guys where he was, liked to write lyrics, but he had a studio, but he really, he didn't really know how to go about you know, getting some music to the lyrics. Like he knew how to do, of course it was a studio, so he knew how to work the equipment, but he was needing kind of a partner. And so he reached out to Prince and said, "Hey, I've got some lyrics. I want to try to put them to some music. Maybe you and us could meet. Maybe me and you could collaborate." And at first, Prince seemed like he was like, huh? According to Chris Moon. But after, I guess he thought about it for a few seconds and he was like, sure. So Chris Moon would allow Prince, he gave Prince the keys to the studio and he told Prince he could come in after school because at this time, of course, Prince was still in school. Um, he allowed Prince to come in and, work on some music and also write songs together. So they ended up putting together a rough demo of some songs. And at this point, this is, I think, right after Prince graduated from high school in June of 1976. So at this point, he is in the studio all the time, recording, writing, and just kind of doing his own thing. And he really doesn't have an interest in the group anymore. And by this point, they had went from Grand Central to Grand Central Corporation to now they're Champagne. And so they went through all these changes. At one point, Morris Day's mother was their manager and was trying to get them signed on with Isaac Hayes, but that somehow fell through. And so Prince, I think, was just getting frustrated because he really wanted to kind of branch out. And at first he thought he wanted to do the group thing, the band thing, but then I guess he was just really getting anxious and just wanted to get out and do his own thing. And so he when he was doing all of this writing and recording with Chris Moon, he actually approached Chris Moon at one point and asked, well, would you be my manager? And Chris turned him down because he said, well, no, I really, don't do that kind of thing, but I know someone who does. And so he referred him to Owen Husney, which would be Prince's first manager. But before he could do that, Prince actually went to New York on his own to actually kind of sell, well, not really sell, but kind of, well, yeah, sell his demo. He was trying to get a record deal, basically, on his own. He stayed with his sister Sharon at the time, and he was just going to, different labels, I assume, and was, and I think he made a little headway. He talked about it a little bit in his memoir, The Beautiful Ones, how he got into contact with some people that were trying to, give him money for, his demo. And he said, he didn't want the money. He really wanted a deal. And so nothing came of it. And Owen ended up calling him while he was in New York and told him that he would represent him and that he could come back to Minneapolis and they could, start working on some things together. So Prince came back home to Minneapolis. He met Owen, and they started kind of polishing those demos that he had took to New York. And then they decided to fly out to California to try to get him a record deal. So now we are up to 1977. So I'm just reading off of some notes that I made. So the spring of 1977, actually. So they ended up meeting with Warner Brothers, of course, which eventually that's who they went with, CBS, A&M, RSO, and ABC Dunghill. Okay, so they tried to. So what? It was funny. What Owen did basically was he pretty much lied, and said that well, CBS has already offered us this, so we're trying to see if you can match that or do better, or ABC is giving us this, and so we're trying to. So basically, he played the record labels off of each other, basically. And so at some point, I think more than a few of them were really interested in Prince, but eventually they decided to go with Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers was the only one that was willing to let Prince produce himself with, at first, supervision. None of the other labels were willing to do that because he was so young. Now, he was only about 17, 18 years old at this point. And so they're looking at this young kid like, no. But for Prince's credit, he really, really stood his ground on that because they were wanting to get the gentleman from Earth, Wind, and Fire to produce his first album, and he was like, no, I don't want to sound like them. So that's a no. And then they tried to approach him with someone else, but I do remember the gentleman from Earth, Wind, and Fire. I can't remember his name. But Prince was like, no, 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 I'm producing my first album, period, point blank. And so they even decided to, before they started recording, to just kind of like test him to see if he really, was playing each instrument and was actually, engineering and producing and, doing all of the studio work himself. And so supposedly some of the executives dressed up like janitors and just kind of, acted like they were cleaning stuff, but they were actually, paying attention to what Prince was doing. And so by the time he put together a song that would be a single on For You, Just As Long As We're Together. So he actually was putting that song together from scratch. He started with the bass, and he would start with, the bass and drums, and would just go from there. And they saw him do all of that in the studio, and they were just like, wow, okay, I think he's got it. So they kind of let him go after that, even though they did go ahead and give him a executive producer, which he was more so a babysitter, more so than anything else, and that was even his words. Tommy Vakari was his name, and he even said that Prince treated him like shit, and he really didn't feel like. Now he said the only time that Prince would actually ask for something if it was something that he didn't know about. But other than that, he said Prince would just do his own thing, and if he had a question, he would ask it, or he would just kind of just, soak up, all of this knowledge, about how it is to be in a studio and, the different mechanisms. But he had already got kind of an education on that when he was working with Chris Moon. So by this time, he was very comfortable in the studio and kind of knew what he was doing. So he started recording For You. And so supposedly he did played 27 instruments on this record. So I'm going to name all of the instruments that were listed on the For You, like the dedication page and all that, where you see all the credits of who did what. So all right, so here we go. 27 instruments, all vocals, which vocals are instruments. I'll give them that. Electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass synth, singing bass, fuzz bass, electric piano, acoustic piano, mini Moog, poly Moog, ARP string ensemble, ARP Pro Solus, Oberheim 4-voice, clarinet, drums, syndrums, water drums, slapsticks, bongos, congas, finger cymbals, wind chimes, orchestra bells, wood block, brush trap, tree bell. And then they put on here hand claps and finger snaps. So I'm not going to give him the hand slaps and finger snaps because, yes, your fingers and your hands are instruments, but I'm not going to. I wouldn't count that as an instrument per se. So now we're on 25. And don't think that I'm just trying to take these instruments away because I'm trying to be, of course, y'all know I love Prince, but we really need to kind of understand exactly the mechanisms behind all these instruments. And I am by no means an instrument expert, okay? So you can please tell me if you hear this and you think I'm wrong, please correct me. But let's go back up to the electric, acoustic, and bass guitar. Now, I will count those as separate instruments only because you do have to play them kind of differently, So I'll give him that. Yes, you're strumming, but with an electric guitar, the strumming is a little different than how you would do an acoustic guitar. And yeah, I know I'm not a guitar, player, but I could even tell why, just watching him play and watching other guitarists play. The strumming is similar, but it's not really quite the same. And of course, with the bass guitar, it's definitely not the same. A good friend of his, Larry, what is his last name? The guy from Sly and the Family Stone, Larry Graham. One of the best bass players of all time. Supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but supposedly invented the slap bass, where you just, kind of just like slap the the body of the bass guitar. So you're doing stuff like that with the bass guitar. And so the bass synth, I think that is like a keyboard, I believe. Singing bass, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm thinking it may be some type of keyboard, maybe. Fuzz bass, electric piano, acoustic piano. Now those two pianos, I don't know if they're like the guitar and you play them differently. I wouldn't think so. But once again, like I said, I'm not an expert, so I'm gonna say that those two pianos can probably be played similarly. So I'm just gonna say that's one instrument. So where are we at now? So we've got electric guitar, so vocals, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass guitar, that's 4. Bass synth, singing bass, that's 6. Fuzz bass, that's 7. Electric piano, acoustic piano, I'm just going to say those are one instrument, so that's 7. Okay, the mini Moog and Moog and the Polymoog are synthesizers. And so I'm going to count, I mean, you probably do have to play them a little differently, but probably not by too much. So I'm going to just say that's just one instrument. The Arp String Ensemble and the Art Pro Soloist. I actually looked these up. Okay, so the Art String Ensemble is kind of like if you want to do violin sounds or trumpet or horn sounds, which he did use a lot. And you do actually have to kind of program that. And so because of that, I'm going to count that as an instrument by itself. And then the Art Pro Soloist is kind of the same thing, except you can use your voice. You have like voice expression control where you can do growls and pitches and bends and vibrato and things like that on it. And so you don't necessarily have to program that, but it does, come with that. And so the Oberheim, I know that's like a organ, clarinet, drums, sin drums, water drums. Now the drums, I know the water drums and the sin drums and especially the water drums. I know you definitely have to play those a little differently than you do the sin drums and the regular drums. So I'm going to say that the water drums are an instrument by themselves. Slapsticks and bongos and congas, those are definitely all instruments to themselves. Finger cymbals as well, wind chimes, orchestra bells, any of those bells. I mean, they're chimes and bells, so it's not a lot of skill, but at the same time it is, because if you're trying to incorporate it into a song, you have to, know how it's going to sound and, what I'm saying? So you have to have a little skill, because those are just kind of just like, like bell. Like you have to be able to make a bell sound like it's meant to be there in the song. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a producer. I don't, you know what I'm saying? But you get what I mean. So I'm going to give him all of these instruments except for the two mini Moog and the Polymoog. I'm going to count that as one. So what is that? We said 25 earlier. So 26. And I took away the hand claps and finger snaps. So what is that? I can't count. 25. So I'm going to say the bush trap and tree bell. That's also like another bell. But like I said, with the bells, like I said, it may seem like they're just bells, but you really have to be, you have to know what you're doing to put those bells into a song. You don't have to be necessarily skilled to play them. But if you're going to put them in a song, you have to kind of understand their acoustic value and understand how they're supposed to be put into a song. And so I guess I'm, putting all of that. So out of the 27 instruments, it's looking like if you take away the hand claps and finger snaps, 25, and then so 24. We're going to say 24 because I'm going to count the two mini Moog and Polymoog. I am going to count that as one instrument. So I'm going to say he did 24. So how does that sound? What do you guys think? Because, and the reason why I'm, giving him a lot of leeway, like I said, once again, is because a lot of these instruments are, are played differently, especially like I said, the water drums are going to, played a little bit differently than the regular drums, and the bass synth is going to be played a little bit differently than the singing bass. So I mean, there's just, and like with the ARP string ensemble and the ARP Pro Solos, you actually have to program those. So it's much more involved than just playing. You actually have to be able to program. Just like later on when he would use the LM1 drum machine, he would have to program that, to get the type of beats and stuff that he wanted from it. And the creator of that particular drum machine even said that he was surprised about how the beats and sounds that Prince was able to get out of that particular instrument. He had programmed it in such a way that even the creator, didn't understand how he was able to do it. So that's how much of a genius Prince was when it came to instrument playing. So there you have it. I think I'm going to end it there because I'm trying to, keep it right at 30 minutes because I'm not trying to just keep, going on and on. But I'm going to say that he did 24 instruments. So how about that? So before we end it, though, we'll talk about, okay, I'm going to briefly talk about how For You did on the chart. So it came out, like I said, on April 7th, 1978. It peaked at number 165 on the pop charts. And it did a little bit better on the soul charts, as it was called at the time. It peaked at number 21. And then we didn't see it again anywhere on the charts until May 14, 2016, just a little couple of weeks after Prince passed away. It came back onto the charts, but it only peaked at 138. So it didn't do as well as Prince had hoped, but I still believe that it was a solid album. It did get 2 singles, Soft and Wet and Just As Long As We're Together were the 2 singles. And the only other writing credit was actually for Soft and Wet. It was a co-write credit that Chris Moon received. So that was the only credit. They kind of disagreed on writing credits for Just As Long As We're Together, which they ended up settling that much later on in Prince's career. But okay, so one more thing. Before we end it, I wanted to tell y'all a few things about For You. So apparently there were a couple of incarnations of the songs. So there were some songs that were taken off and some songs that were put on. And so the configuration of the album has kind of changed a little bit. So I'm getting this information from theprincevault.com. So it says Prince's handwritten notes were used in the Beautiful Ones book, which was released in 2019. So he has some handwritten notes about a different configuration of For You that he had. Let me see. Okay, this configuration, there was a song called Send in the Clowns, which was written by Prince. And it was being attributed to being written by Prince, but it was actually written by a lady named Judy Collins. So I guess it was going to be a cover that he was going to do, that he was going to put on there. But that ended up not going on there. The notes also reveal 4 other track titles that were previously unknown: Body Freeze, Never Really Fell Out of Love with You, You Are Everything probably to Me, and Let Me Touch You, as well as 2 tracks that were previously known but which did not make it onto later configurations: I Spend My Time Loving You and Love in the Morning. So he had some other songs that he was supposed to put on there, and I'm assuming a lot of these songs are probably still unreleased. So it says on the Prince Vault, it is assumed that these tracks were indeed recorded, but it has not been confirmed that the album was ever actually compiled in this form. It is certainly possible that Prince was working through ideas when writing down this track list. This track list is included below as an early configuration. So that was an early configuration of the album. A later configuration of the album contains a different sequence altogether, okay? So it includes some more unreleased tracks like Make It Through the Storm, and here it's titled We'll Make It Through the Storm, and Amber Eyes. And some of the versions included varying time from the released album, and the unreleased sequence is listed below, although minor discrepancies do not necessarily indicate a different version of the song was used, and many it may reflect simply a difference in the silence at the beginning or end of a track. So he was playing with a lot of different songs at this time. It's basically what the Prince Ball is saying. And so yeah, we talked about the two singles, and we talked about how it did on the charts. What else? So a lot of these, I would like to hear some of these songs that did not make it on here. But here's a tracking of the songs that did come out. Okay, so For You, In Love, oh no, this isn't it. This is something. So this was going to be the original listing. For You, In Love, We'll Make It Through the Storm, Crazy You, Just As Long As We're Together. That's side one. Then side two was going to be Baby, Soft and Wet, My Love Is Forever, So Blue, and Amber Eyes. So I guess he didn't do Amber's Eyes, and We'll Make It Through the Storm didn't get on there. So he just did, because we know the last track on For You was actually I'm Yours, which I think is probably one of the strongest songs, if not the strongest song on the album. So all these other songs, Baby, Soft and Wet, My Love Is Forever, So Blue, they were on there, of course. We'll Make It Through the Storm. I would love to hear that song. And Crazy You, of course, was on there. So just like with, anything else, he went about trying to, play with different songs and try to figure out how they would all sound together. One more fact about For You. So they gave Prince a budget of $180,000, and guess how much he spent to make this album? $170,000. So he literally spent 90% of his advance to make this album. So so it will be interesting later when we find out when he started on his second album, how he went about trying to, keep the costs down, so to speak, with his self-titled album. But, it was a good first try with this album. And actually, For You is one of my husband's favorite Prince albums. And when I first heard it, I really, really liked it. His a cappella singing in the first track called For You is beautiful, and the way he layered it was wonderful. And I mean, I like the water drums in I think it's Crazy You, and his acoustic playing in So Blue is beautiful. And of course, I'm Yours, the rock and roll track. I mean, his guitar playing is phenomenal. So, I mean, I really do like all of the songs on it. But it is an album that has to grow on you, I think. Because when I first heard it, I was just like, oh, okay, it's nice. But now, For You is an album that I go back to more frequently now. Now that I kind of understand, the history behind it and what all went into making it, I definitely have a better appreciation for it. And I know that Prince, being only 19 years old at the time, I know that, it was, his pride and joy, and he wanted it to do so well. And so I can only imagine, how disappointed he was when it didn't do as well as he thought. But luckily, he was at a label that was willing to work with him and understand that, hey, well, this is just his first album. We're going to keep working with him, and he's, going to get better, because they were already very impressed with him. So For You was just, it was a good start. It was a decent start. But he would get better and better, of course, as we know. So we're almost at 40 minutes now. So I'm going to end it at that. So you guys have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And we're going to be back next week. We're going to do 2 episodes that are going to be way shorter than this one, I promise, because they're dealing with Prince's identity. Episode 3, we're going to be talking about his sexuality. In episode 4, we're going to be talking about his race. And because there's a lot of ambiguity. Yeah, I'm trying to use big words and can't pronounce them, y'all. I'm going to just say there's a lot of gray area in regards to certain aspects of his sexuality and race. Well, really, though, there really isn't, to be honest. But for some people who are not as well versed in Prince's, say maybe you or I, they make assumptions about Prince based on, you know, some rumor they heard or how he looks or, you know how it is. You know, when you get talked about because you're a Prince fan, oh, you like him, and he gay, and he, isn't he this, isn't he that? And not to say that, of course, being gay is a bad thing. It's not. But, back then, especially in the 80s, that's kind of, gay was kind of a bad connotation. It isn't, of course, now, but it was back then. And you didn't definitely want to be associated with, anyone who might have been gay. But we know that Prince wasn't gay. But we're gonna talk about it. And like I said, it's gonna be way shorter than this episode was. But if you're still listening, thank you, thank you, thank you, and please continue to listen to the podcast and also invite people to the Facebook page. And let's have a dialogue also about not only this episode but future episodes. I really, 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 really want your feedback. Okay, love you guys. See you not see you, but we're gonna talk the next episode. So stay tuned. Peace and be wild. Ronica Crutchfield out.